My name's John Grotti, and I'm an artist based in Seattle, and the sculpture here for New Bend Library is called Juniper. I just feel so good about doing something for a library. And I didn't quite realize before this project how much a library is about community gathering. I think of libraries as this web that's connected. It's not just your local branch. With the sculpture, you have these different concentric sets of rings. It's almost like they reflect these different communities that are part of this larger piece. We've been working on this project for about a year. Sometimes our projects can take a lot longer, and this is a really large project, but we devoted a lot of energy to it in a shorter period of time. We're at my studio in Seattle, and we're working on a new sculpture called Juniper. First thing I'll show you is the model that I originated with. I really like the simplicity of building a simple mock-up. Working with humble materials allows me to just think in a very free way where I don't become precious about anything that I've done. Amidst this small model here is a lot of the Alaskan yellow cedar, which is what we're using to make the sculpture. And this is pretty special stuff because it's old growth. It's from the Tongass National Forest. We think that some of this wood is probably about 600 years old, and some of it was standing dead for almost a century. There's two primary inspirations for the project. I spent a lot of time wandering in the Badlands, so just east of Bend, and then some time up on South Sister, and I just thought about how these two things would relate. And my aha moment was thinking about the interior of a juniper, and not just a flat cross-section, but I wanted it to be more dynamic. And then I looked at, right as the fingers are coming down from that glacier on South Sister, there's this ravine, this kind of long canyon. So my idea was to essentially, instead of having that flat cut, I would fold the shape of that ravine or canyon from South Sister, and that would define the shape of how I cut into that juniper with all its dynamic strata. But I think the more subtle part of the sculpture is the polycarbonate that's all been riveted together, and those are, of course, referencing the glacier it's retreating. This is certainly not one person having a vision and making it. I have 15 people in our immediate group that are in the studio, regularly working on the physical sculpture. But also within that group of 15 people, there are people that are doing software. So we're building this in something called Rhino, and then we're using CNC to get a certain amount of accuracy, and then there's a lot of handwork at the end. The first thing we're doing with this raw cut cedar is we're milling it down and we're smoothing it. So we're running it through the joiner, we're running it through the planer, and then we bond them together. When we've milled up these forms and we've got large slabs, we take them to the CNC machine. So right now, Janelle is taking one of our slabs off. So this is after the CNC machine has cut the pieces from her raw slab. She's flipping it over so that the machine can cut the back side. And then we end up with pieces like this where we will literally have many, many thousands of these parts, but they're all keyed together so that we can dowel them. We're making our own dowels out of the same wood, so everything will be this Alaskan yellow cedar, be very cohesive. And then we glue them together. So here you can see them coming together. And with each of these, you've got these points which register them with our dowels. So you're having a registration between each of these sections, which is doing two things. It allows us to have an accuracy before we come in and we hand shape all of these things, but it also gives us structural integrity. So you don't really want your grain running like this because anything can snap at any time, but because we have all those dowels running through it, we now have enough integrity that the thing won't fall apart. Here you can see a section that we're starting to shape. So we're getting it off the CNC, but then we go in by hand and we're shaping this. And that's, to me, I really love the marriage of the hand with the accuracy of the machine. I think bringing those two together works really beautifully. Ideally you'd build this whole thing in its entirety, but this is 50-some feet by 30 by 20. It's bigger than we can fit in our workshop, so we had to do it in sections. The sculpture is broken into actually 19 sections. So you see this line of seam right here, and then everything over, this is one section. Now we're bringing this section and we're marrying it to another section. But what that means is when we have to bring together these sections, we come in by hand and marry these joints. I really believe that you feel the human hand and those sorts of things. Especially, you know, we have this outermost layer around the whole perimeter, which is referencing the bark in the cross section. And I think you're going to get a nice sense of the human hand. So this is not, you know, these flat planes. It's much more undulating. And you'll see when we get to the installation, we're going to use these same panels, which you can see tongued together, so that you can see, we'll run a laser up onto the ceiling of the building. So we actually physically know that this is going to correlate with the sculpture. We don't have to rely just on a digital model, which makes me feel a little bit better.
We did have a nice long installation. We didn't need all that time because things came together really remarkably well. And we have a lot of adjustability in how our cables hang. It was a very large job just creating a map of where our cables were going to be and then actually prefabricating all those cables and swaging them. And then the way in which they engage the wood, we have these little adjustable mechanisms. So when we put it all up, we had flagged where each of these is supposed to be in terms of its height, and then we had the ability to make little micro adjustments on everything. So you didn't have to commit each one before you went to the next one. And I think that enabled us to dial it in really, really carefully.
I want each project to be really specific to where it's going. I like the space so much because it's got the grandeur of a major museum space, but it's a space that's honoring and making community gathering possible.
We tend to have an association that a library is a safe place to go. No matter who you are, you be wealthy or poor, you can feel like, yeah, I'm welcome at that library. I could meet with a group of people, of my friends at that library. So I love that kind of level egalitarian piece of what a library is. Everything about this buildup is so beautifully done. So it's a nice honor to be part of something of this quality, and it makes you want to meet that with a high quality of what you do. So to bring the quality and know that it's going to be reflected felt really great.